and found that my wife was doing better. I didn't think much of it at the time, but after that weekend, I noticed Darren was home more frequently than usual. Previously he went out every day, but now he hasn't left the flat in several days. I asked whether everything was fine, and he just shrugged, claiming he was trying to save his money. I didn't think much of it at first, but as time passed, I began to notice more things that stood out. When I returned from work one day, I discovered that my wife had already arrived home. Apparently, she had taken a half day off due to a headache and forgot to notify me. Another day, I arrived home early and noticed Darren and my wife entering the house together. They stated that they had just met outside the building. This could just be a coincidence, but I had a horrible feeling about it. I had never questioned my wife's devotion before, and while Darren was a messy person, I didn't think he could do something so heinous as that. Still, I couldn't ignore the impression that something was off. I knew I couldn't accuse them of anything without evidence, and doing so would cause upheaval in my family, which I wasn't prepared to cope with. So I took a straightforward approach. I asked Darren how long he planned on staying with us. I reminded him that while it was fantastic to have him around, he should think about his future moves. Thankfully, he caught the message and stated he'd be leaving within a week. My wife was in the room during the chat, but she said nothing, which made me uneasy. Darren moved out, and I attempted to ignore my misgivings, concentrating on my marriage rather than worrying about the worst-case situation. Things improved after he departed, and I began to believe I had been overly paranoid. I was mortified to think that my wife would do something like that, especially because she had been the perfect spouse all these years. However, around 2 weeks ago, something happened. We discovered that my wife was pregnant, 2 months to be exact. You probably know where this is headed. When Darren moved in with us 2 months ago, I felt sick to my stomach. I'll offer you some context. I am a few years older than my wife, as I previously stated. By the time I was 30, I was ready to settle down and establish my own family. When my wife and I first started dating, I knew she was the one for me and wanted to marry her. However, she believed she was too young to have children and wanted to wait a few years before making that decision. Though it wasn't what I desired, I approved of her choice. We always took precautions since we decided to wait until she was 30 to start looking for children. My wife always insisted we be very careful since her body reacts poorly to hormonal birth control and she is not on any tablets. I also always utilized protection. Accidents do happen, of course, but I could not get over the sense that something was off. I felt the timing to be unsettling. She said she wanted to keep the baby, that although this was unplanned, it was a good thing and we ought to be glad. Long since I had desired children. Under different conditions I would have been ecstatic, but instead I was in excruciating pain. Though I attempted to seem content to my wife, I don't think I have ever felt worse. Uncertain of what to do, I wanted no one to criticize me, thus I couldn't talk to any of my friends about it. Nevertheless, I couldn't get rid of the bad ideas and emotions. I knew I couldn't continue living in total anguish after about 1 week. I had to face my bride. I knew this would have a terrible effect on our marriage and should I turn out to be mistaken, she might never pardon me. But I kept thinking of the worst. The prospect of her carrying the baby of my stepbrother made me sick. After our first visit, completed several blood tests and procedures, all I could feel was total devastation. I decided to talk to her as I could no longer handle it and got ready for the worst. I told her I had to talk to her about something quite crucial about a week ago during supper. She wanted to know straight away. Though afraid, I aimed to be as direct as I could. I apologized for feeling this way, but I questioned her whether she actually carried my child. My question seemed to her startled. Her whole face flushed red, and she began shouting, accusing me of being a monster for questioning her and committing something so terrible. She said she had never strayed from me. She wondered where all this was coming from, and I told her it was too much of a coincidence she was 2 months pregnant, the same length of time Darren had left. She became much more irate as a result and began yelling even more. Seeing the situation becoming bad, I tried to cool her down and get her to pay attention to me. I told her it hurt for me to live with these uncertainties. I told her about the events that occurred during Darren's stay, wishing I had no harbors of uncertainty and felt something was off. She seemed to relax a little and assured me she knew I had questions, but she also advised me to believe her and our marriage would be stronger. Though I felt awful, I told her I wished I could just ignore these ideas. Having attempted, I wanted a paternity test following the birth if there was really nothing to worry about. I even said I knew how tough this must be for her, but I had to be sure for my own peace of mind. She seemed to be really more extreme than I had expected, so clearly I didn't expect her to be entirely cool with this and felt she might flare out a little. If she was angry before, the reference to a paternity test sent her off. She said I was nasty and she couldn't believe I would force her to go through something so embarrassing over my crazy thoughts. Though I attempted to remain cool, really seeing her so against the concept made me feel as though my suspicions were vindicated and I started to get enraged. I told her this was an ultimatum, that if she disagreed, I doubted we could be together. She admitted she needed time to consider it, and this seemed to help her somewhat relax. That evening we slept in different rooms. We said nothing to one another the next morning before reporting to work. I fantasized the worst-case scenario as the truth all day. The remainder of the week reflected that. She would ignore me and arrive home late at night. She grew upset every time I tried to chat to her, so I finally gave up. I had no notion she was merely deciding on her next action. When I got up in the morning last Thursday, I discovered she had not returned home the evening before. She never responded when I texted her many times. I had to report to work, but I was so agitated that I couldn't concentrate and so left early for home. I waited hours for her, but I grew rather concerned when she still hadn't returned home by 9 p.m. and would not answer my calls. Not sure what else to do, I asked her assistant at work about her. My surprise was that she hadn't been to work and had taken 2 personal days. Her assistant expressed amazement at my ignorance of this. I was somewhat concerned at that point and phoned some of her friends to see whether she was with any of them. I started picturing the worst when all of them claimed they hadn't heard from her. I fretted about her leaving me or about something happening to her. I asked my mother-in-law, MIL, a last resort, whether she was with her. She wasn't, but upon learning my wife had vanished for 2 days, my MIL started to get really concerned. She promised to try to get to her and let me know whether there was any update. Should she still be inaccessible, we agreed to phone 911. I was completely terrified in the next half hour, but suddenly my wife called. She stated she was absolutely fine, wanted some time to sort things out, and that I had no need to stress her out for no cause or involve her mother. She sounded even angry, very apathetic. I became enraged when she showed no regard for freaking me out, but I calmed down and asked her where she was and when she was returning. She hung up, then declared she would be returning early the next morning. Frayed and somewhat angry, I went to bed. I considered spending some time apart from her. I had no idea what lay ahead of me. The next morning she woke me up and seemed especially content. She stated she was fixing a problem, when I asked her where she had been the day before. Trust me when I say I spent weeks considering every conceivable scenario that might go wrong. What she said next was crazier than anything I could have imagined. She explained that this pregnancy was killing our marriage and causing foolish questions in my head, hence she decided to rescue our marriage by means of an abortion. She met my eyes squarely and stated, now I had no reason to question her loyalty, we could start our marriage anew. I looked astounded. I had never used that word and really meant it before in my life. I simply asked her if she was kidding after just staring at her. She stated she was totally serious and hoped I could unwind now and stop allowing stupid worries to disturb me anymore. That served as my breaking point. After several more minutes of staring at her, I stood up and departed. Spending another second with her worried me that I would have some kind of mental collapse. She started to follow me, but if she wanted peace, I advised her to avoid me. I guess my tone was severe enough to stop her. I phoned my attorney on the way out of the building to let her know I was divorcing my wife and needed to start the process immediately. I also scheduled a meeting for the following morning and advised her we had to make sure my wife missed a penny of my money. Though I had no idea exactly how things would turn out, I knew what I had to do. I asked Darren where he was when I phoned. He claimed to be in Atlanta, someplace. I asked him not to waste my time. Simply admit that they had slept together. I was divorcing my wife. He said nothing for a few minutes, then simply apologized to me. That helped me too. I understood there was nothing else to say. For the evening I checked into a hotel and got ready for what I knew was in store. I woke up the next morning, headed straight to my attorney, and gave her all the specifics, the infidelity, the abortion, everything. She claimed that we did have a shot, even though it's tough to have a clean divorce with no alimony unless both sides come to a mutual understanding, as my wife has a high-paying job of her own and is most certainly the one at fault here. Really, I was more concerned with the cause than with the money. With this woman I was finished. She could be very frigid, which astounded me. It seemed like I had lived all these years among strangers. The person I loved and married would not be able to do anything this crazy. She had slept with my stepbrother, but there was still a possibility she was pregnant with my baby. Now we would never know. Changing my plans to suit her wants, and doing everything I could to be a decent husband, after almost 6 years in this marriage, this is what I received. Inquiring whether she was at work, I phoned her assistant. She became. I urged her not to tell my wife I phoned and lied about arranging a surprise for her. I then headed home, loaded as many of her items as I could into 3 suitcases, and arranged them in the hall.